Thank you everyone for attending. Our goal for this event is to have a lively learning opportunity. All you've got to do is text that number, tell them your seat number, and tell them what kind of drink you want, and it'll show up within 5 minutes. That's what they tell me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aaron Lohr. I'll do a quick introduction on myself before getting to the rest of the folks. Let's see, I've been in the business for 17 years. I can't believe it's been 17 years. Started StrataCore 10 years ago. A little bit about StrataCore. We're a consulting broker for IT infrastructure services. We've got 140 clients, and we help them buy services across both domestically and across the globe. Here's my one and only slide. Just a few of our clients, as I'm really excited about the clients that we have. We have access to over 400 service providers all across the globe, and when I say service providers, I'm referring to data center providers, connectivity providers, and cloud providers. Before I give the microphone over to Tom Spoonmore, who is our moderator today, I wanted to tell a quick story about one of the first projects that Tom and I worked on together. I haven't run this by Tom yet. We worked together, I want to say this is about 2007, 2008, back when Tom was at InfoSpace. And I was lucky enough to be chosen as their broker for their services, and he had a new project that was coming up. And they needed 200 racks of data center space. I was like, oh great, this is exciting. I'm pretty excited about working on this project. And he wanted to tour 12 facilities. So, okay, we can tour 12 facilities. That makes a lot of sense. And then the next catch, and we being InfoSpace, need to be completely anonymous throughout this selection process. Do you know how hard it is to get this guy through security at AT&T data centers, Verizon data centers, when he won't tell them where he works? But we made it happen, and it was really exciting. There were a couple other tricky parts on this project that I just want to share with you because it relates to what we're going to talk about today. When we got the proposals back from the providers, we found that providers had on average about 4 different definitions for metered power. It's really hard to do an apples-to-apples comparison when people are using different terminology and different definitions. We also had 12 different contracts and SLAs to look at and to consider, and those SLAs, most of them were fairly laughable. And then also there were numerous back-end infrastructure designs and back-end architectures that we had to review, and they were all a little bit different. Through it all, we sorted through it and we figured it out, and I think we found a great home for those 200 racks. And what is interesting is that the challenges we had back in 2007 and 2008 as relates to those data centers is the same challenge that our clients are having today as they look to source and evaluate the different cloud providers, cloud ecosystems, cloud options. There's different pricing methodologies, different terminologies, different contracts, different ability to be flexible between the options. Different risk assessments and infrastructure design. So I view it as our job is to help our clients see through those complexities, make things more clear, more transparent, easier to compare, and that's what we do at StrataCore. And I'm so proud of the work, Tom, that you and I have done together and the relationship we've had over these years. It's truly a pleasure to work with someone who's so kind and experienced and intelligent. It's really one of my favorites. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tom, and he's going to moderate.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Aaron. I don't know whether to thank you or cry. Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And thanks Aaron and StrataCore for putting on this event. I think learning about OpenStack in Seattle, I think, is really important. It's a complex topic. It's very nuanced to where it is in the market today, and I think that through this panel discussion, we should be able to flesh it out a little bit better for everyone. Just in terms of a few logistics, I'm going to do kind of a broad swath past OpenStack in general. Then we'll do intros, and then we'll jump right into the panel discussion. After we get it kicked off, I'll look for any questions that the audience might have, and we'll mix that in and see if we can't get a lively discussion going here. So just a show of hands, how many people know about OpenStack? How many people consider themselves fairly knowledgeable about OpenStack? And how many people have deployed it? We've got a few deployments in the room. Okay, so I'm gonna briefly go through some notes on OpenStack just to give everyone an idea of what it is, level set the room a little bit, and then we'll get straight to the panel. So OpenStack and really large-scale web operations kind of have driven public cloud in general, and the combination of virtualization and automation software in large-scale web operations gave way to public cloud and what we now know as infrastructure as a service. Amazon built this for their own use and then ultimately commercialized that, and we now know that as AWS. And that kind of the promise of cloud and infrastructure as a service gave way to a number of open source projects, including Eucalyptus, CloudStack, and ultimately OpenStack. OpenStack came out of some work that was done at NASA, then eventually at Rackspace. Kind of came to the fore as an open source project a couple of years ago, 2010 now, and then was developed from there as an open source project. So what is OpenStack? OpenStack is effectively a framework. It's a cloud operations framework. It is an open source project with a number of sub-projects that effectively deliver on-demand compute, storage, and networking. It also offers some ancillary services like compute imaging and also some security services as well. It's a set of projects that communicate through a common API. They communicate over a common RPC bus to intercommunicate between multiple elements of the stack. It's intended to be a tunable, configurable, not a monolithic piece of software. In fact, you don't have to implement all of OpenStack. You can implement piece parts of it. And from the perspective of if anyone's look at the NIST standard for cloud, OpenStack meets just about all of the elements of the NIST standard. OpenStack community is very large at this point. OpenStack is run by a foundation. The foundation has about 12,000 members, 275 different companies across 72 different countries. There's about 1,000 developers contributing to OpenStack, which is about a 2x increase over the last release just 6 months ago. So there's a lot of development momentum behind OpenStack. OpenStack has a 6-month release window. So current release is called Havana. These go alphabetically. The last release was Grizzly, and the next release is called Icehouse. We just came from Hong Kong, where there was the Havana Summit, which is a planning summit for the Icehouse release. And Icehouse is coming out in April. There was about 4,000 people at that summit, maybe a few more, which was tremendous considering that it was in Asia, and it was roughly 65% more than people that attended Portland, which was Grizzly. So it was really an amazing turnout. New projects in this release include orchestration. The code name is Heat. It's kind of like, if you guys are familiar with AWS, it's kind of like CloudFormation. And also the Ceilometer, which is a metering chargeback kind of capability. that's been added. The uptake in deployments has been pretty significant as well for OpenStack. According to the last, every 6 months they do a survey. According to the last survey, which had about 800 respondents, they identified about 387 different deployments that are out there. And we have our first text drink. This is Aaron. 185 of those deployments are production, which is 2x over the last survey. So, so there's a lot more deployment activity that's happening right now as well. What I thought was interesting about the deployment numbers was that it's pretty even across company types and sizes. So small companies as well as large companies are implementing OpenStack. And though most of them are IT-related companies, it does have some penetration in the market that's pretty broadly accepted. Key drivers for the implementations were cost savings, operational efficiency, ability to innovate, no vendor lock-in, open source, that kind of thing. So, I see the promise of cloud in general and private cloud specifically as really kind of falling into 3 buckets. And one of them is this ability to take our virtualized data centers and our virtualized infrastructure and to introduce a self-service kind of capability to them. The second element that I refer to is this capability for hybrid, the ability to move workloads freely from your private infrastructure onto public infrastructure and back. And the third thing, which is kind of the most forward thinking or kind of next generation IT, is this idea of applications that can provision themselves, that can utilize resources, deprovision resources when they're not needed. And though I say that's kind of forward thinking or looking, just think about how Dropbox works or how Netflix work. This is absolutely how those businesses do their everyday work. So so it's not so strange. And I think that with platform as a service, containerized application delivery, MapReduce, continuous integration, continuous deployment, network function virtualization, all these are examples of kind of next generation applications that will be able to take advantage of this as long as there's a common API between public and private, and that's something that OpenStack can bring. So so the question for tonight is OpenStack up to it? Can it deliver? Is it the platform for all of these capabilities? There's, some have their doubts. So there was been some pretty scathing blogs recently talking about the governance. There was a blog just yesterday from Gartner talking about the inability for OpenStack and the foundation to be able to speak to the needs of the enterprise. And these are, real and significant concerns. And so, so these are things that we'll talk about this evening. But the main question here is, really, is OpenStack right for the enterprise? Is it time to really start looking at it? How can we drive adoption of OpenStack with the enterprise? And is it something the CIO should bet on right now? Is it a tool for our utility belts, or is it really just another kind of jetpack that we're promised and never really arrives? So with that said, I'd like to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us how they're involved with OpenStack. Jesse, we'll start with you.
Great, well, pleasure to be here. Thank you, Aaron, for organizing. So I'm Jesse Proudman, founder and CEO of Blue Box Group. Blue Box is the inventor of Drinks as a Service. It's the latest OpenStack project. Glad you're enjoying it. And
you're going to get like 1,000 people now signing up for that.
It's going to be incredible. It's going to be talked about. It's the next Solomon. Bluebox is an OpenStack on-demand provider. So we've built infrastructure that allows us to deploy private OpenStack clusters in an elastic fashion. So today, if you think private cloud, you go build infrastructure in your data center, you put OpenStack on top, but what do you do when you need more capacity? Well, you've got to order more hardware. We take the pain out of that and give you an infrastructure that is fundamentally elastic underneath, but still is single tenant at its core.
I'm Jared Ray. I'm the CTO of Cloud at CenturyLink. This is my new position. Before that, 2 days ago, I was the CTO and founder of Tier 3, which is a large-scale cloud computing technology service that was in 9 data centers, large-scale footprint. We dealt with the enterprise, and I built that for the last 7 years. On OpenStack, I'm the guy in between these two who, they both love OpenStack, and I'm the guy in the middle who, runs a very large production-grade cloud, and I've done a lot of work around OpenStack and also open source, but we actually haven't deployed it worldwide.
I noticed you mentioned it in your last blog post, though.
Mm-hmm.
So it's of interest.
It's very interesting.
Well, I'm Joe Speck, Senior Director of Systems Infrastructure at Tableau Software, and I don't care about OpenStack really. It's a tool for me to get things done. It's not, OpenStack doesn't cut my paycheck, Tableau does, and my job is to make our developers successful, make our infrastructure reliable, scalable, easy to grow, ahead of our rapid growth. We have 200 developers, test, QA, build systems and build team members that we need to support, and OpenStack is a tool in that tool belt to be able to do it. We've implemented it, over the last year and a half, grown it insanely. It's grown to probably over. Last look, I think we created and deleted more than 10,000 VMs in the last 7 months. So it's a really great product as a tool, but then again, you have to know how to use it. It's like any tool, and I'm a big proponent of it because it fits our needs. At the same time, we use other tools as well. VMware we use quite a bit just because of the type of needs that it fulfills. So we also use AWS for a lot of things. So it's a balancing act. As a kind of from the other perspective, is I'm a consumer. I use it for where it's appropriate, and there's some places where it's not appropriate. So, and I forgot to say, Tableau Software, we help people see and understand their data. So you should check that out. You can tell I'm in sales, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess where I wanted to start the conversation is kind of from a higher level than OpenStack, and then we'll kind of dig into how OpenStack fulfills that. But so, what do you guys think about just private cloud in general, the concept of private cloud, why it's important to enterprises, and should it be important to the CIO? Jesse, you want to?
Yeah. So, private cloud as a term can often be deceiving. So cloud is about elasticity at the end of the day. Private cloud enables elasticity, but historically within a defined box. So if I deploy infrastructure at my data center, I have a very set amount of capacity that can be managed using something like a cloud toolset, OpenStack, CloudStack, Eucalyptus, VMware, but it's not elastic. If you look historically at the evolution of virtualization, that became about consolidation of infrastructure and getting higher levels of utilization out of hardware. Cloud became about a delivery mechanism for applications. So the challenge with on-premise private cloud really comes back to that elastic component. And with AWS and its feature set and its evolution and the acceptance of those types of public cloud tool sets, what private cloud needs is a mechanism of elastic capability for those engineers within the organization.
Mm-hmm. So Jerry, what do you think?
I think elasticity it's troublesome because realistically in the enterprise that they already have common workloads and they're all steady state. So elasticity is kind of a farce for them. Most people should be able to do enterprise or public or private cloud, whichever way they want. And I would probably say 80 to 90% of their workloads are going to be steady state. So, when you think about OpenStack or CloudStack, Eucalyptus, we can name like 500 of them. Really, it's about agility. Like that's what enterprises care about. When you look at how they are doing business today, it's really, how do I go faster? How do I take that pendulum and swing it and go faster and actually execute on what the business wants us to do? Because we all know in the enterprise, the IT guy gets beat up 24/7, right? Because the business wants to go faster, and they're like, well, AWS does it. And that's what I see OpenStack is. It's a framework to go faster. Elasticity, it's an argument. I'm a public cloud. I mean, most of our customers are steady state workloads, big, complex, steady state workloads, but the average change of their environment is a 15% change on average. That's not huge. Elasticity is, we always hear in the highlights, but I think it's really about the agility. That's what we care about. For private cloud, it makes sense, right? There's going to be points. The bigger thing is, and when we get into OpenStack, are you ready to actually run a private cloud? Because running a cloud is way different than running a simple set of hardware or even a component. I would even argue that OpenStack isn't a cloud. AWS is a cloud. They have tons of services. They have all of them integrated together. They have an orchestration system that's very powerful. OpenStack's compute storage network. I mean, it has other components around it, right? But realistically, that's all it does.
Yeah, it's definitely in the early days. I often think, when I think about private cloud, I think about self-service. And I think that's what you're doing a lot.
So, I mean, as far as elasticity for us, we build software, right? We build software so that people can see and understand their data. And when we look at the use case, right, we build these machines that people deploy the application on, they test it, they validate that it's good, and then they're done with it. And then they come the next time. One of the biggest use case was they come the next time and they have to get it to a known state, and then deploy software, test it, make sure it works great, or build, or whatever. What we're doing with OpenStack, in particular, I know you didn't want to talk about OpenStack yet, but is we automate that deployment, build, test, and then if everything goes great, it's destroyed. We don't. If everything worked the way it's supposed to, all the automation, all the automated tests work great, it's deleted and destroyed. And then the next time it comes along, and you get a quality in there where if it goes sideways, then a developer has to get in there and look, hey, what went wrong with my automated tests? And you get a certain amount of quality from that because you always start with a known state as you deploy from any aspect, from dev, test, QA, and customer support.
So, since everyone wants to talk about OpenStack, so how does everyone feel about how OpenStack is aligned with kind of the private cloud vision, elasticity, self-service? Is it aligned with that vision? Is it achieving that?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the foundation of OpenStack as a project, evolving out of a service provider, I think a lot of the originating characteristics are very service provider centric. So we talk about the extension of services. Well, OpenStack really as a core was compute, networking, storage, which as a service provider are the components that you need. To me, agility and elasticity are very similar and rely on API-driven self-service compute, storage, and networking. And OpenStack, with its current iteration, has built a technology, and you're exactly right, it's a framework, it's not a product, right. Which is, I think it's key to remember. And what you said originally, where you can use very different portions of that framework in your deployment, that's a key to remember as well. But it's reached a point of maturity where it really does deliver the agility, the elasticity, the flexibility that organizations need in a private environment, and even if you look at HP or Rackspace or IBM in a public environment as well.
Yeah, I think long-term OpenStack can do that. I'm trying to think of it from the enterprise point of view of like what they're currently doing today, because really their cloud is a virtualization stack built on VMware that's owned in the market today. And most enterprises are doing greenfield applications, which could work in an OpenStack environment where they don't need HA or DRS or a lot of those built-in features that they're using right now, right, to save their bacon and make sure everything's up and running. But at the same time, you really have to think about what is the benefit for them long-term? How is that even going to work? I think OpenStack is a great framework, especially, I think, dev test lab environments. I would, if I was a CIO, I would never bet my production on it, unless I was a big tech company. That would be that's how I would say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of roll with that. What Jared said is very right. You have to know the limitations of it. You have to know where you can use it, where you should use it, and then where you shouldn't. It's just like using AWS as well. You have to know what the limitations are and design for that. You have to know where your failure zones are. You have to know how to plan for the unexpected, and or you should expect them if you're in my job. Scenarios that crop up. What if this switch fails? What if this data center goes? What if this rack goes down? I mean, those are all things that you have to know, and it's a tool that if you use it within its limitations, works great. If you try to make it do something that it's not good at, just like anything else, you're going to be in trouble. When we look at one of the things you mentioned VMware, what it does very well in DRS is that high availability, right? And that's not something that's built into OpenStack. You can build it pretty robustly, but you have to be able to plan for whatever the failure zone is to be able to fail. And it's a design type thing, and you have to understand that when you're building it.
All right, I want to clear up those two things. So OpenStack as a technology platform is not designed to replace VMware. That was never its intent. It was designed to be a cloud infrastructure. VMware was designed to provide a virtualization layer for enterprise workloads. OpenStack was designed to be a true cloud environment. And so if you're expecting to deploy OpenStack and lift and shift off VMware, you're doing it wrong. What we're finding is our customer base is installing OpenStack alongside their VMware implementations, and as engineering begins to build the next generation of application, they're deploying it using next generation technologies on top of cloud infrastructure. I think one of the big takeaways I took out of the summit in Hong Kong was the rate of adoption of OpenStack in China. And if you look historically, from the conversations I had with analysts there, China really didn't adopt the VMware, sort of missed that era. And so now as they begin to develop new applications, they aren't stuck in this notion of, I've got all my legacy infrastructure on VMware, and how do I get it moved on OpenStack? No, they're saying, I'm going to deploy OpenStack and deploy these next generation technologies on top. And so if you look at the numbers the foundation released on rates of adoptions and deployments, we're seeing a ton of deployments out of China for that specific reason.
So, Joe, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the main obstacles for enterprise adoption of OpenStack?
Well, I mean, I think just like enterprise adoption of AWS, I mean, it's the same set of constraints that you have to put on what you're trying to get accomplished. When you look at when you go to OpenStack, you have to know that I'm going to build it with these parameters, and if I'm going to try and take what I'm running on virtualization now and put it on OpenStack, that'll probably work all right, unless you're dependent on some of the features of the current, if you're using VMware, and you could use VMware underneath OpenStack as well. But I think a lot of the people that think that hey, like you say, I'm just going to replace VMware with OpenStack. That's not a one-to-one option, right? You have to be able to be understanding of where you're going to place things, how they're going to place, and what happens when they go down.
Jared, what do you think? Or I hate to open this can of worms. But what do you think?
No, I actually agree with both of them. Basically, what we've learned is that it's for greenfield and dev and test. I mean, like in the end, that's what it's built for right now, and it's unbelievably good at that, right? It's built like you were saying for that cloud service provider, but it's greenfield and dev and test.
Greenfield doesn't need.
Agree with that. I'm sorry. So I don't know if I agree with that. Which is, if you know how what you're going to put on it. If you're going to put everything on it, yeah, sure, I agree with you.
Right.
If you're going to put parts of things on it in a hybrid scenario, certainly you can deploy application servers and way scalable application servers supported by backend databases that might not be on any virtualization. As a matter of fact, that's the way I see a lot of things going. Is where if I can go N-way and I know what those failure zones are, and I build it across 25 racks and 25 failure zones, then you can put your applications distributed over there, and you can be very successful and get a lot of the benefit of OpenStack, which is, look, I can deliver these things via API, my application server. I don't have to have one of my admins get in there, set it up, deploy, boot up the image, deploy it, then deploy the application on top of it. I can actually boot everything right up in OpenStack and maybe some public configuration after there, which is what we do to get it rocking and rolling. And if you understand, this is an AZ, this is an AZ, this is an AZ, and those are 3 different racks, and you can withstand the failure of any one of those, you certainly can run OpenStack in production.
And I want to point out that greenfield doesn't necessarily mean immature or not in production, right? Greenfield means...
I agree with you. Greenfield is like brand new production grade applications that are built for like web scalable.
But Amazon's been around since 2006, so the notion of engineering cloud-oriented applications has been around just as long, and so there are now 7 years of applications that have been designed to run in a cloud-oriented environment. And so
well, let's just ask, out of this entire group, how many of you are running and your life is dependent on a cloud-based application running Cassandra, Hadoop, large-scale web application? How many is that? That's your primary business. Okay, 3.
I mean, you're here to learn how to do that.
Well, no.
There we go.
That's like the difference.
Like everybody wants to do it. The problem is that OpenStack hasn't been, first of all, it hasn't been mature enough to actually do that until, say, February.
Well, the other thing, I would say too
like
that
such a bad cop out. It's like, well, that's where we're going. That's
No, I'm saying that's where we are.
Enterprises have been developing SOA and web service applications for a long time, so there's a lot of that out there.
Right. I do not disagree with like a 3-tier application or even going SOA or building web scale. And yes, since 2006, that's been around, right? EC2 came on the market.
Yeah.
We were one of those cloud providers on the market at the same time. What I'm saying is, if I was going to build a private cloud today, or if I was at a company and they said, okay, your butt's on the line, this is where you're going to be, and we have a VMware environment and we have an OpenStack, yeah, I would put next generation on OpenStack. It would be cheaper, right? It's more cost effective, and there's a lot of things that you can do to automate, which is great. But at the same time, the rate of development in the enterprise, not tech, not Seattle, not, we're talking about the rest of the country too. That is not huge, right? Let's say it's 3. There's probably like 85% of legacy applications that you still have to run every single day. That's not going to go on OpenStack.
But why would you lift and shift? If it's not broken, don't fix it. Why would you lift and shift an enterprise application anyway?
Well, this is the same argument actually that we had with VMware, in virtualization 5 years ago, right? Like people said, oh no, you can't put this on virtualization. This is our bread and butter.
Right.
When I left my last company, we were 72% virtualized. I'm sorry, Chris. We were 72%.
You can say Disney. That's fine.
So when I left Disney, we went from, what did we go from, Chris? We went from like 0 to 72% in 3 years, right? And people said, what the hell are you doing, right?
Yeah,
and
which is awesome.
That's exactly what people are saying now about going with private cloud, however you want to, whatever flavor of private cloud you want to eat.
Right. But the question, just to make sure we're all, what are the pitfalls of OpenStack today? Right? Right. I mean, that's what we're trying to learn, because everybody's trying to learn about OpenStack. I'm actually a big fan of OpenStack. I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be a dominant framework for everybody to deploy off of. It will be. There's tons of developers. There's contributions. Tier 3's done Iron Foundry and Cloud Foundry. We plan on doing contributions around that, even at CenturyLink. I mean, there's going to be more work to be done for that. It's just, where are we at today? What is the easiest? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that really make sense for an enterprise to dip their toe and actually get OpenStack up and running? Because right now, if I told somebody, yeah, you should go and download OpenStack, they would go to the repo and not know what to do.
Sure.
Exactly.
Right?
And it is hard, and maybe that's a good transition. And, so OpenStack is difficult to implement. It's difficult to operate. You have to know a lot in order to operate it. Comment on that a little bit and how that might be an obstacle for enterprise adoption.
I think it's actually an opportunity. That's why we have a business, right? So our business is about delivering these environments as quickly as possible to customers so they can begin experimenting or testing or doing dev test or putting in production. As you said, OpenStack, it's an open source framework. It comes off the shelf. There is no installer. That's why you've got 8 different companies that have all built on-premise implementations that include full 24/7 management with some of the companies, that include makes the installation seamless. You've got companies like ourselves who are doing the hosted variant. The fact that it's not a prepackaged product is not an obstacle. There are companies in the marketplace today that are solving that problem.
And what would, you know this even better than I do, what would you recommend actually dipping your toe on the water? What types of applications? What would you put on that? And where are you seeing your customers? Sorry, I shouldn't be asking the questions.
I was going to say, that's the last question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, do you want to wait to the end? Do we want to go now?
Well, no. Well, I think we said that it was not greenfield, but more SOA scale, web-focused applications are probably the best applications to put there. But Joe, when I was talking to you the other day, the phrase that you used is OpenStack is not free.
No, certainly not. You can choose to pay for it one of 2 ways, right? You can pay for it with system engineers and admins that learn it, do it, implement it, and deploy it and support it on a 24/7 basis. Or you can pay one of these guys, and I've done both. And you can pay a third party to do it, and it's at some point it's a math problem, right? Where which is easier, which is better. I can tell you some experiences going both ways, right? When it's your guys supporting it, it takes a while to get to the answers because they're not doing OpenStack every day. They're not in there every day, probably, unless that's your business. But for me, we build software. We don't build OpenStack deployments to sell to people. So they don't understand everything, all the moving pieces, where to look when there's problems, as well as these companies that's what they do every day. And so on the other side of that is, you're going to pay somebody to do it. And if you do that, if you make that choice to have somebody do it for you, your guys will never know it. Your guys, the people that you have, sorry about that. The people that you have that are running the environment don't know anything about it really. I mean, they know kind of how it works and what the interface is, but underneath the covers, wow, that's a bummer. Let me get on the phone and call whoever's supporting you. And, we use MetaCloud for our support. They've been fantastic. At the same time, it's cost my team's experience level at it quite a bit. They don't have the experience running it, and they will never get it in that environment because the training wheels are over there. And you have to kind of figure out if there's a balance. And my balance is I run both. For my ops team, for our internal stuff, we run OpenStack so the guys learn it, and we run it for our first level staging, so that we understand it. At the same time, the vast majority of our systems that are for our developer support, we pay somebody to do it. We pay them for support after our guys can't figure it out, and like, boy, I don't know what this is, and hand it off. So that's kind of the balance, and that's why, in my mind, it's never free. It's not a free thing.
It's all about focus in my mind. We want our customers to work with OpenStack, not on OpenStack. And you hinted that there's a 6-month release cycle. That means every 6 months there's a new version of OpenStack that's being released. Every 6 months that new version of OpenStack often has new services. I think Havana had somewhere like 14 different services in total, on top of, including those 4 core networking, compute, storage, the 3 core building blocks. So if you think about that 6-month cadence, that means your internal team has to stay up to date with that cadence every 6 months, and that's a lot of. It's a full-time job.
Sure, and conversely, you're going to be behind if you use a third party, in my experience, right? Third parties have to support it, so they have to get it, install it, run it, work through all the bugs of Havana or whatever, Icehouse, before they're going to say, hey, you guys, we're going to support you 24/7 running on it. So if, like right now, our ops environment is in Havana and our supported environment's in Grizzly. And that's just been the experience. And the more that they guarantee it and support it, the longer that wait time is.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll go here.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Benson Miller. A question for you, Jared. I'm trying to probably unfairly distill your concerns down into a soundbite. But one of the things that I think I'm hearing here is not that you can't get OpenStack to work for you in production, but that if you look at Jesse's experience at Blue Box Group doing cloud before the word cloud was around, and Joe's experience at Tableau, living and breathing this stuff, but still relying pretty heavily on third parties, is the concern with enterprise production deployment that a skepticism about enterprise's ability to operationalize it in comparison to, say, Jesse's ability to operationalize it, living and breathing it on a day-to-day basis, or is it something more fundamental about the governance of OpenStack or the integration of 14 different services or something like this?
Yeah, great question. I'd actually love to have these guys chime in too, but in my opinion, when you look at OpenStack, there's going to be a compute, storage, networking, multiple services platform or framework, whichever way you want to call it, built. It's and what it boils down to me is when you are building more than just a single node or a single footprint or even a single availability zone, you have to think of two major factors, right? The maturity of what you're deploying and how that's going to work. And that maturity is big for people, right? You cannot chase fires 24/7. You can't figure out what the latest code is. You just can't do that at scale. You have to understand how mature that software is and how that's going to be deployed. I think that there is a lot of progress towards it. I think that there's going to be even more, and there is momentum, which is great. The question is, how comfortable are you with where that maturity is of the software itself? And there's a lot of services. I mean, how many services were added with Havana?
Either 3 or 4. Yeah.
3 to 4 services. And when you think about that, it's like, okay, how mature really are they? The latest one, which is, I cannot say it right, yeah. If you look at that code, I would not run that ever as my cloud. I mean, it's not ready.
That's a metering.
It's a metering
system.
tool.
So is that a production requirement for a production deployment? Do you need meter? I mean, I think
right. But it is a project. It's getting deployed. It's a V 0.5 at best. And when I'm looking at this at large scale, man, it would really suck if I could not bill my customers or audit the system correctly.
So the way I like to think about OpenStack is a tree, and the trunk of the tree are those core services,
Yep.
and those core services need to support the branches. And ciliometer, heat, all the other ancillary Marconi, the queuing service, all these pieces are branches off of that tree.
Mm-hmm.
And without a solid foundation, it doesn't matter what the branches do, and the branches aren't necessary to run that foundation. But come February or March with the Grizzly release and now Havana, that trunk, for all intents and purposes, with the exception of a little bit of code in Havana, or in the Neutron, which is the networking engine, it's solid, it's tested, it's reliable, it's running at large scale in public clouds.
Right.
And to me, those ancillary projects, it's not a huge concern if they're not involved in it. I need to make an intelligent decision about the level of sophistication there before I deploy them. I agree with that.
It's the maturity of the software
But
itself.
the core trunk of that tree is solid.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So one quick question. So I honestly believe that there is a maturity bet that has to happen. And whether it's the branches on the tree or the trunk, I actually disagree with the trunk. There's still fundamental problems with that system, and they're going to fix it. It's a young project still. I mean, look at Linux. How long before everybody freaking deployed Linux everywhere? Now it's everywhere. The second thing is operationalizing it. Are your people ready to understand all those components? And I think Joe did an amazing job. And actually, I think services like Jesse really prove out that, you know, that's a great way to dip your foot and understand what OpenStack is really about and understand what you can do. Because the first thing your business cares about is that agility. You know, like Joe was saying, I don't care about OpenStack, I care about running my business. That's what really matters. So you got to figure that out, and operationalizing a brand new system and bringing that into the fold. And when the fire drills happen, how are you going to support that? And a lot of people are not ready for that yet. I mean, the enterprise is right now dominated by a pretty core set of services. I mean, even if we said, because it's Seattle Hyper-V, so say it's VMware and Hyper-V because we're really cool, those are unbelievably stable. Unbelievably stable.
And you're going to suck at the first time you do it. The first VMware implementation we did, terrible. People, VMware sucks. No, it was our design sucked. You know, we did not design it right. You know, and we learned lessons from that initial design. And like, wow, it is really important to have a lot of memory in these boxes. Or it's really, you go into it thinking, oh, I'm just going to slap some competing workloads on here. It's going to be great. It's all going to use all the CPU. Well, the scheduling isn't that good, and making sure that this processor and that processor run at the same time. Those are lessons that we learned, and I'm sure you guys have learned from VMware implementation. And so whenever you do OpenStack the first time yourself, you're going to be not very good at it.
Right, but what I'm talking about is you can go and get 500 engineers that understand VMware. There's very few, and you're going to pay that tax when they're learning OpenStack. And you need to understand that and get and be okay with it. There's going to be a tax. I mean, Jesse has IP because of it, right? Jesse's built a lot of stuff because of that. You guys have invested a lot, and you've also used other people who understand it too.
Yeah, we pay people to do it.
But it comes down to that maturity, right? People understand. They're trained on that. You got to understand those sides. So those are the two things I think you have to really consider and balance, especially while you're building this out. What are you going to do and how you're going to do it? Now, 5 years from now, OpenStack's going to be pretty amazing. You just got to really play that and understand what your risk is.
Let's freeze you on that note. In 5 years, OpenStack's going to be amazing. So let's talk about hybrid for a second. How real is hybrid? When can we get there?
What do you mean?
What's your definition?
Hybrid meaning I'm running workloads in the public cloud and the private cloud, and then beyond that, I'm able to move workloads between public cloud and private cloud. Start there.
I'll start. Sorry. It's a dream. And right now, I've only seen it work in batch workloads, or Netflix, who spends a lot of engineering money to do so. But batch workloads, where I'm going to batch process this set of results that I need to get out of this big pile of data, I can send it off, and it's going to come back to me with results. That's pretty flexible, and I need some more. Let's just farm it out. It's been a dream. With when I ran ESPN. I want to span out during heavy loads to somebody else and come back in. We never achieved it. I don't know if they've achieved it yet, but that was certainly a dream of ours. That was the goal, and it's hard. It's really hard to do. Go ahead.
Was your problem bandwidth related? Were you constrained on your ability to get data to and from the provider?
Well, I would say there's a number of problems. One of them is maybe that, but more on getting the data out there. Like for the most part, if you look at whatever you're going to build out to serve out to somebody, there's a data element to it, and that data element is not easy to move around in general. Maybe if it's small enough and it's light enough, but then you can just use Akamai or a CDN for the most part to do that part of it.
Yeah, it's usually like the back end for scalable, like to really everybody
It's
talks about,
latency more
I'm
than
gonna,
anything else.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if you have a lot of data, it's hard to keep it in sync. It's hard to have that, latency in between to really handle that. There's a lot of risk for it. I honestly think, like anybody whoever says cloud bursting, that they just don't understand the speed of light. Like, you just can't do that.
Well, I mean, the one area that I've seen it, a possibility is that you have a small part of it built out there that has the necessary data and is only getting, as you say, deltas of the change to keep it current, and then you can burst out there. But what you're really doing is just you have some pod strategy where you can then through DNS trickery or however you want to do it, get your pods spun up and down. But that's about the only way that I've actually seen it come close to being functional.
So I actually disagree with the two of you. I think it is possible today, and we have customers that are doing it. And I think the challenge is really what's the definition of hybrid? And there is no great definition because it can mean so many different things. So we have customers today that are running application workloads on Blue Box and are using Amazon for a whole collection of external services, whether it be Redshift or Glacier or additional services that make sense at that scale. Is that hybrid? Well, arguably it's a public cloud, and then they're bursting in with a private environment within our data center. On the flip side, we have customers that have integrated our private cloud with their data center deployments through direct cost connects, and that latency issue that you brought up at that point goes away. So we have a partnership with Equinix. We're in Equinix's facilities today for that specific reason, to be able to tie into customer sites and to eliminate or make that latency issue as minimal as possible. So the question is, can I move my workload from here to there seamlessly with just raw infrastructure as a service? I think we are a ways away from that. With something like platform as a service, I think that changes the game a bit. So AppFog is a great example, which is also now a CenturyLink company. AppFog built platform as a service that spanned Amazon, Rackspace, I believe they were on HP as well, and had a capability to move workloads between those facilities. It wasn't totally seamless, but they could do it. And the key there is that platform as a service abstracts the infrastructure away, because the challenge today is that Rackspace public cloud, HP public cloud, and community OpenStack, and Amazon all speak different APIs. So if you can abstract away that layer, just talk at the application container layer, now you've got the ability to move workloads around. But again, this is you have to design your infrastructure to sit in that platform.
I'm a huge Cloud Foundry fan. So
indeed.
I agree with you on the Cloud Foundry part. I honestly think when we talk about the ability for your application to span multiple data centers or even have that capability long term, it's going to be at the platform layer. The application layer is going to do that for you. It's not going to be infrastructure. You're never going to spin up VMs for it. It's too costly to do that. And when it comes to data, which is actually the hard part, I mean, even AppFog, which is a CenturyLink company, it packages it up and moves it. It's not real time. The holy grail that every IT guy in this room wants is, I instantly push a button and beep, 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 beep. Everybody can take on that resource somewhere else. I'm on AWS, but really it's the back-end data problem, right? If you have a big data set and you're trying to keep that all in sync in real time, it's very hard to do. I agree with your hybrid approach, right? Where you're like, hey, I'm using services over there, but my main application's here. I think that's a really bad architecture, because then you have a data center issue and you're completely offline. But yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, I think there are customers that are doing the multi-data center, multi-cloud provider, distributed data implementations today. But again, it's something that is new. It was engineered to do that, and it's not simple. We get this question all the time. We get customers that say, hey, we want to run across your 3 data centers. I'm like, great, we can give you the infrastructure to do that, but you have to engineer the application to be capable of that. And the conversations often end right there.
Right, and there's systems that do that, right? Yeah, no, but I mean, even like, the tier 3 platform, we use Couchbase across our entire platform worldwide. We have a distributed database system that literally runs in 9 data centers, multiple clusters. I mean, I think we're at a 64 node cluster environment, and we run that worldwide. When you log into any single platform from any point of the world, it keeps in sync. Now, we also do a lot of DNS trickery to make sure that you're homing into certain data centers, you're not hopping all over the world, so we miss your data and not keep it in sync fast enough. Because even with our connections and what we have, there's data latency, right? Consistency is a big problem, but that's a lot of work. Not very many people are even on those types of systems yet. Now, I want that to happen, but that's not even part of OpenStack.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I
a
think-
whole nother cool project.
Exactly.
Well, and I think, you know, I think you said it from the very beginning, in Greenfield, you have those opportunities, and if you're gonna put your enterprise application, which to me means it runs inside my data center as these 3 servers in this database, you have to be ready, you have to know the constraints of your virtualization system,
Yeah.
including OpenStack.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a great discussion. And if there's no other questions from the audience, we've got one.
Thanks, Tom. So maybe it's not really a question, it's a sentence, which is sort of designed to, it's a fill-in-the-blank sentence, okay? Designed to kind of summarize and validate, because I think that the answers might be a little bit different amongst all of you guys. So if the sentence is, so fill in the blank at the end, the sentence is, OpenStack will not support high-integrity production services unless blank.
I mean, I think I said that, like, unless you design for it, right?
Unless you design for it.
If you know the constraints, if you know what happens when this thing doesn't work anymore, and then you insert what this thing is, data center, rack, power, switch, you know, anything in between there, and that goes away, and you know what happens when that goes away, and you design for it, you can use it anywhere. It's just like any other tool. Like, what happens when this thing goes away? And I don't think that it's limited. It will not replace something where you have to rely on it for availability. That's not its goal. That's not its workspace, at least right now.
So Piston Cloud, which is an OpenStack distribution, made a great shirt a couple OpenStack summits ago, and it was a picture of a puppy and a picture of a cow, and it said no puppies. And the notion there is that if you rely on your physical infrastructure and you treat it as something that has to exist, you're not designing for a cloud environment. So having something that you don't mind if it goes away because the next one's going to be identical, and your system is architected that way, that's the type of architecture we're going for with OpenStack.
Public cloud in general.
Public cloud.
Yeah, but if I'm the CIO at Colgate-Palmolive, I want to know what my production support costs for the next 3 years are going to be. And I can do a terrific job of investing in the design of the implementation, but how do I really know what my production support costs are going to be in 3 years from now?
Are you going to do it yourself, or are you going to pay somebody to do it?
Well, either way. I
Well,
want to
if
know
you
what
pay
those costs
somebody
are
to
going
do
to
it,
be
you
as
can know what
relatively a
those
certain
costs
way
are.
as possible.
Contract for it, then you know.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
that's.
what you do with VMware or OpenStack.
Hey, frankly, that's what I do for half my environment. You know, I because I want to know the cost, and I want to know, you know, I plan on how that's going to scale, and I built into the contracts. You know, when we have n number of hypervisors, then we're going to pay less, and I know what the costs are. I know how it's going to work. I know, and I also have a vision out there of, like, there's a limitation where, well, that's an untenable amount of money that I'm going to pay somebody to do this. I can, you know, hire a handful of people and do it myself.
So you shift the risk over to an outsourced provider.
No, I mean, I think the risk is always yours. I mean, I own it 100% of the time, and you know, there's no getting away from owning risk.
Kind of that safety net.
Yeah, whether you deploy VMware or OpenStack or HP servers, you own the risk, right? You pick those guys, and they're the ones that put it in for you. Now, yeah, you can hold them accountable for a certain level, but at the end of the day, if HP is not delivering for you, and you continue to hold them accountable, and they're still making your business fail, you're going to be the one that pays for it. I mean, I'm going to be the one that pays for it. And if I've got to have that ability to move around, and that's one of the, you know, that's, I guess, an ancillary piece to this is, if you bet on one of these, you know, pick OpenStack distributions that you're going to go with, you lose, just like if you pick VMware only, you lose a little bit of your flexibility to go somewhere else. And that's, you know, that's a balance you're going to have to decide for yourself.
Can you elaborate on that?
So, as I said earlier, my guys don't really know, half my team that runs the developer support systems, they don't really know OpenStack. They you know, they couldn't, if I said, here's 10 servers, build me an OpenStack environment, and I came back in a month, it wouldn't be built, right? I mean, maybe it would be, they're smart guys, but it's also takes away from their job. But so if all of a sudden that service isn't working out for me, and you know, I'm relying on it, I have a bit of vendor lock-in from that perspective. Like, hey, I'm depending on you guys, and I can't really redo this myself. And so, as you can see, that's kind of one of the reasons why I chose to do both at the same time.
I actually think that's one of the brilliant parts of OpenStack, is that it gives you a mechanism where, say, MetaCloud goes out of business. You've got an open system with APIs that are compatible, so mostly compatible across the distributions, and you could drop in a different on-premise provider, and there'd be some transition pain. But you're not like, if VMware goes out of business, what do you do? If MetaCloud goes out of business, you've got options.
Yeah, no, that's a completely fair point. I agree with that, and that's some of the risk mitigation, right? Is that it's not going to necessarily be easy, but it is doable. You know, or if they just change their pricing model to charge me on memory instead of processor or something.
Percentage
They
revenue.
would never do that.
No, vendors would never do that.
Okay, well, thanks.
There's another one.
Oh, we got one more.
Yeah, so when as an operations guy, one of the biggest parts of my job is migrations, right? Moving from one version of something to another. So in the days when everything was a puppy, like I would just upgrade my Labrador to Great Dane, and there was clear differences, and everybody was like really happy about the upgrade. Now that I've got 1,000 cows, right? I've got to upgrade 2 or 3 of them at a time, and I've got to be able to feel confident that they're all going to work together in a herd, right? So I'd love to hear your perspective on how well the OpenStack community is managing the process of developing APIs that are capable of being incrementally migrated, right? So that I could upgrade one cluster to a new version of OpenStack and run it for 2 or 3 months, just burn it in, test it out, make sure that everything in production still works correctly on it, without necessarily having to full-fledged commit to it, right? That kind of stuff.
So let me see I'll restate the question. So how is OpenStack doing at keeping its APIs consistent from version to version?
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, in summary?
Well, compatible, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think in the earlier versions it was certainly hit or miss. And if you look at, if you start to dive down into some very specific API calls or very specific functionality, more miss than hits there. But again, to me, it's about that trunk of that tree, and the trunk of the tree between Grizzly and Havana and going into Icehouse has become very, very strong. And I think people recognize that problem, right? If those things are changing with every release, that inhibits any kind of adoption. It makes those releases too painful. And one of the powerful things about OpenStack is the velocity it's moving. So we want customers to continue to upgrade and move forward. And so I wouldn't say it's flawless, but I think it's certainly headed in the right direction, and we're happy with that direction.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, we've been pretty lucky with that. We've gone through Essex and Grizzly and Havana, and it's been fairly seamless. The Essex to Grizzlies, which we went to, was the most challenging. But overall, it's been as good as most other things, like Service Pack 2 of any Microsoft product. Right? It's one of those things where it's part of our job as IT professionals to have to deal with some of that. Some of the way you design your systems, as far as availability zones and being able to partition it out, and boy, I'm gonna upgrade this AZ, let it run for 3-4 weeks, see how it goes, see what happens with it, and then move on is probably a good professional thought process.
Yeah, I'd probably just say in cloud computing in general, and actually, me and Joe were talking about this, is cloud computing is really about risk mitigation. It's not about being able to do upgrade management. It's about being able to move those workloads somewhere else, right? You never want to do upgrades where live data is being transacted. And I'd actually agree. Not that I would say too much about it, but moving from Grizzly to Havana has been very easy in many cases, even at large scale. So when you think about long term, it's really how are you going to design your architecture for risk mitigation, and how are you going to do it for upgrade also. There's great architectures to do that. we are constantly upgrading all of our cloud resources worldwide, and we see with an OpenStack, a VMware, if you architect it correctly, you can do upgrades seamlessly, and that's really the key. Don't ever trust that someone's going to, when they say click the button for simple update, that's when you know you're not going home that night.
So Tom, sorry to keep peppering with questions, but I have one more, actually,
Okay.
from the standpoint.
Still got questions, Tom.
the-
You can keep on going.
Yeah. So,
Text and drink order.
So increasingly it's an enterprise imperative to convert CapEx to OpEx. And that's, that's everywhere now, really. And it's, particularly the mid-tier enterprise, which frankly, for all cloud providers and related companies, is by far the biggest opportunity out there, actually. So how does OpenStack help an enterprise convert CapEx to OpEx?
So are you gonna run it yourself? I mean, if you're gonna use Blue Box, right, they'll charge you every month.
That's what we do. That's exactly what we do. So we give you an OpenStack private cloud, and you pay out of your OpEx budget.
Yeah, if you're gonna run it yourself, you're gonna, and even if you're going to pay somebody to do it for you, run the actual OpenStack deployment, you're gonna pay for the hardware, still CapEx investment for the most part, and you can pay them via OpEx as well. So,
But that's the exciting part to me, is that it gives you that level of option. Because certainly there are workloads that it might make sense to have that CapEx spend for. And there are workloads where it might make sense to just have it direct.
Well, there's some things I can't hand over to a provider.
Yep.
I have to run behind the firewall.
Well, the idea with private cloud is that it's single tenant, that there's an air gap. And with our deployments, it's a single tenant implementation. There's an air gap behind it. We can put it behind a firewall. So that shouldn't be a barrier to transition to OpEx.
Yeah, it hosted private cloud.
Correct.
So I would probably say that the only thing you really want to think about long term is, and this is, the enterprise really hasn't even taken a foothold in public cloud at all. There's still just massive amounts of workload, still in data centers, on virtualization platforms, and that's where they are right now. I honestly think OpenStack has a huge opportunity, because steady state is, and for all accounts and purposes, can be cheaper running in an OpenStack environment inside their data centers, and this is a massive advantage for them, especially with the idea, not to promote Jesse or anybody else, but when you think about that, you're going to get to a point where steady state is very cheap for you, and there's going to be a point where you're going to have other workloads that need a better hosted model or a better support model or something like that, or even that elasticity, and that can be in a hosted private cloud environment, and you can still get those benefits. Steady state is going to be like one of the biggest discussions that you're going to see in the enterprise, probably over the next 3 years, because public cloud, even though the price wars are on every single day with them, there's going to be a point where they say, okay, enough is enough. We're hitting that rock bottom point. Probably give it away, or they give you a check every day. But
there's a lot of discussion right now with using private cloud for repatriation of private cloud workloads.
Yeah, but it's really about steady state, and I think OpenStack has a huge advantage there.
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've looked at doing other businesses purely at AWS, and if you're not ready to be able to spin up and spin down, it's probably not as cost effective as doing it yourself.
Right.
It's absolutely not.
And in addition, it takes a lot to get there to be able to spin up and spin down. You have to spin it up, monitor it, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and when it's not, you have to tell it not to do that anymore. Right?
And public clouds are going to win public clouds are going to win long term against steady state when the developers are architecting applications that use services that they've already built. I mean, AWS has 20 plus services. We have 13 to 15 services in our platform, and those are going to be the things that are the big drivers, because that's when steady state gets even more cheaper, right? You go up there and you're like, hey, I can use database as a service. I don't need to use that and build my own. But if you're going to be in your own private environment, steady state is going to be a big number that you have to look at, and it when you actually run the math, it starts looking good.
I think actually last I looked, which was before reInvent, Amazon had 124 services.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's take the next questions to the bar. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out that, so I know that we were all like congregated in front of the bar and in front of the front door, but there's actually a secret room back beyond the bathrooms, and there's food in that room. So that's something to visit. And also there's another room back around the bar here on this side of the bar that people can congregate in. So there's a little bit more room for all of us than we were using before. But listen, StrataCore, thanks. I think this was a great event. See you all at the bar.